The cabin lights were dim, casting a soft glow over rows of tired passengers settling into their seats. The low hum of the engines filled the air as the plane cruised steadily at 30,000 feet. It was supposed to be a normal flight. Quiet, uneventful, just another routine journey for everyone on board. Among them sat a man by the window, calm, relaxed, almost invisible. No attention, no noise, just sitting there, eyes half closed, as if nothing in the world could disturb him. That man was Steven Seagal, but no one around him seemed to notice. And maybe that's exactly how he wanted it. A few rows ahead, however, something was different. A voice suddenly cut through the silence. Loud, aggressive. Are you even listening to me? Heads turned instantly. A passenger stood in the aisle, visibly angry, arguing with a flight attendant who was trying her best to stay composed. Sir, please take your seat, she said calmly. But he wasn't listening. His frustration only grew louder, sharper. People shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged looks. Others pulled out their phones, sensing something was about to happen. The tension in the cabin started rising. Fast. The man ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly in the narrow aisle. This is ridiculous, he snapped. And then, his eyes landed on someone. Behind him, watching quietly, not reacting, not intimidated, just observing. It was Seagal. Their eyes met for a brief second. And something about that calmness, that silence, seemed to irritate the man even more. What are you looking at? He barked suddenly, pointing directly at him. A few passengers gasped under their breath. The energy shifted instantly. This wasn't just an argument anymore. Now it was personal. Seagal didn't respond right away. He simply looked at the man. Calm, unbothered, almost as if he'd seen this kind of situation 100 times before. I think you should sit down, he said quietly. No anger, no aggression, just a simple statement. But that was enough. The man stepped closer. Too close. You telling me what to do now? He said, his voice low, but dangerous. The cabin fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Because deep down, everyone felt it. This was about to go very, very wrong. And the man had no idea. He had just picked the wrong person on the entire flight. The tension in the cabin didn't drop. It got worse. The aggressive passenger stood there, locked in place, staring directly at Steven Seagal like he had something to prove. You think you're smart, huh? He said, his voice louder now, echoing through the narrow aisle. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others leaned slightly forward, pretending not to stare, but clearly watching every second. Seagal didn't react the way most people would. No eye roll, no argument, no fear, just silence. Calm, controlled silence. I'm not looking for trouble, Seagal said quietly, his tone steady. You should sit down. Simple words. But they only made things worse. The man let out a short, mocking laugh. Oh, you're not looking for trouble, he snapped. Too late for that. He took another step forward, now standing right beside Seagal's seat. Too close. Uncomfortably close. A flight attendant quickly stepped in again, her voice more urgent this time. Sir, I need you to return to your seat immediately. But he waved her off like she didn't exist. I'll sit when I'm ready, he said sharply, not even looking at her. Now people were definitely recording. Phones were up, eyes locked, because something about this situation felt like it was about to explode. Seagal slowly turned his head, meeting the man's eyes again. Still calm, still composed. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said. No threats, no raised voice, just control. But for someone looking for a reaction, that kind of calmness can feel like disrespect. And that's exactly how the man took it. Oh, I get it now, he said, smirking. You think you're tough. A few nervous chuckles came from somewhere in the back, not because it was funny, but because of how uncomfortable everything had become. The man leaned even closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound more dangerous. Let's see how tough you really are. The cabin went quiet again. Even the engine noise felt distant now. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was turning into a confrontation, and everyone knew it. Seagal didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even shift in his seat. Just watched, like he was waiting, calculating, the kind of stillness that makes people uneasy. That's when a passenger across the aisle slowly lifted their phone higher, making sure they didn't miss a second. Because deep down, everyone felt it. This moment was building towards something. Pause for a second. What would you do here? Would you stay calm like him or fight back? Be honest. Type calm or fight in the comments. The aggressive passenger cracked his neck slightly, clearly trying to intimidate. You got real quiet now, he said, smirking again. Seagal exhaled slowly. Not annoyed. Not angry. Just ready. I'm giving you a chance to walk away, he said calmly. That sentence landed differently. You could feel it, because it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a fact. The man's smile faded slightly, but his ego didn't let him back down. Nah, he said, shaking his head. I'm not going anywhere. Another step closer. Now there was barely any space between them, and that's when the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Because whatever happened next, there was no turning back. The space between them was gone now. Completely gone. The aggressive passenger stood right over Steven Seagal, his presence heavy, his breathing louder than before. It wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was pressure. Real pressure. The kind that makes most people react without thinking. But Seagal didn't move. Not even an inch. His posture stayed relaxed, his hands still, his eyes focused, calm in a way that almost didn't make sense. And that calmness, it started to frustrate the man even more. You think you're better than me or something? He snapped, his voice rising again. A few passengers flinched. Others leaned back in their seats, trying to create distance, even though there was nowhere to go. This wasn't the ground. This wasn't a street. This was 30,000 feet in the air. No exits. No escape. The flight attendants exchanged worried glances near the front. One of them quietly reached for the interphone. This was going too far. The man suddenly slammed his hand against the top of Seagal's seat. Thud. A sharp sound that cut through the entire cabin. A woman gasped. Someone in the back muttered, "This is bad." But Seagal, still calm, still steady, he slowly lifted his gaze again. Not angry, not scared, just aware. "You need to stop," he said quietly. And somehow, that made things worse. Or what? The man fired back instantly. There it was. The challenge. Raw, direct, dangerous. The kind of moment where things either end or explode. The man leaned even closer now, his shadow falling over Seagal. "You gonna make me?" he said, almost whispering, but with enough edge to send chills through the people nearby. Across the aisle, a young passenger tightened their grip on their phone, recording everything. Another person whispered, "Someone call security when we land." The tension wasn't just rising anymore. It was peaking. Right now, people from all over the world would react differently in this moment. So tell me, which country and which city are you watching this from? Back in the aisle, the man's patience was running out. Or maybe it was his control. He reached forward suddenly, not fully attacking, but enough to cross the line. His hand brushed against Seagal's shoulder. A push. Light, but intentional. A test. The entire row froze. Because that was it. That was the moment everything changed. A line had been crossed, and everyone knew it. The man pulled his hand back slightly, watching for a reaction. Waiting. Expecting anger. Expecting fear. Expecting something. But what he got instead was nothing. At least, not what he expected. Seagal slowly looked down at the hand that had just touched him, then back up. His expression didn't change. But something else did. The energy. It shifted. Subtly. Quietly. But powerfully. "You don't want to do that again," Seagal said. His voice was low. Controlled. Different. Not louder. But heavier. And for the first time, the man hesitated. Just for a second. A tiny pause. But it was there. Still, ego is a dangerous thing. And instead of stepping back, he doubled down. "Oh yeah," he said, forcing a grin. "Or what?" Another push. Slightly harder this time. And that's when a few passengers actually stood up halfway, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. A flight attendant rushed forward again, panic now visible. "Sir, stop," she said firmly. But it was too late. Because now, this wasn't just a confrontation. This was seconds away from something no one on that flight would ever forget. And the man still didn't realize. He was pushing someone who had been trained his entire life to handle exactly this kind of situation. For a moment, everything froze. The second push lingered in the air like a warning sign no one could ignore. Passengers sat stiff, eyes wide, phones still raised, capturing every second. The flight attendants had stopped mid-step, unsure whether to intervene or wait, because something had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly, powerfully. Steven Seagal was no longer just sitting there. He hadn't moved much, but the energy around him was different now. Focused, grounded, like a switch had quietly been flipped. The aggressive passenger didn't notice it. Or maybe he did, but his pride wouldn't let him back off. Instead, he smirked again, trying to hold on to control. "What's wrong?" he said mockingly. "You running out of patience?" Seagal slowly stood up. Not rushed, not aggressive, just deliberate. The kind of movement that instantly grabs attention. A few people in the cabin leaned forward, because now, for the first time, they could see him clearly. The way he carried himself, the way he stood, balanced, composed, too composed. "This isn't worth it," Seagal said calmly. Still no anger, still no threat. But something about those words didn't feel like a suggestion anymore. The man scoffed, shaking his head. "Nah, now it's definitely worth it," he replied. But behind him, something else was happening. A quiet shift in the crowd. A whisper, barely noticeable at first. "Wait." Someone leaned closer to their friend. "Is that?" Another person squinted from a few rows back. "No way." A third voice, a little louder now. "Bro, I think that's him." Phones adjusted, zooming in, trying to confirm, trying to understand. Because the man standing there didn't look like someone ordinary anymore. And the calmness? It didn't look normal either. Back in the aisle, the aggressive passenger was still talking, still trying to dominate the moment. But fewer people were paying attention to him now. Their focus had shifted, completely, from the noise, to the silence, from the aggression, to the control. Seagal slightly adjusted his stance, not in a threatening way, but in a way that felt intentional, precise, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And that's when it hit a few people at once. A quiet realization spreading through the cabin like a ripple. "That's Steven Seagal." The whisper grew, row by row, seat by seat. Confusion turned into recognition. Recognition turned into disbelief. And disbelief turned into tension all over again. Because now, this wasn't just a random argument on a flight. This was something else entirely. Something bigger. But the man causing all of this? He still didn't get it. He stepped forward again, trying to keep control of a situation that was slowly slipping out of his hands. "You think standing up changes anything?" he said, forcing confidence into his voice. But it wasn't landing the same anymore. Not with the crowd. Not with the energy in the cabin. And definitely not with the man standing in front of him. Because now, everyone else was starting to understand something he didn't. And that realization was about to change everything. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now. Not louder, not chaotic, just intense. Like everything had slowed down to a single moment. The aggressive passenger stood there, trying to hold on to control, but something in his expression had started to crack. Just slightly, because the energy around him had changed. And he could feel it, even if he didn't fully understand why. In front of him, Steven Seagal stood calm, balanced, completely in control of himself. No anger, no fear, just focus. The kind of focus that makes people hesitate. But not this man. Not yet. "You think I'm scared of you?" he said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. No one laughed with him. No one backed him up. The cabin was silent. Watching. Waiting. That's when he made his move. Sudden. Reckless. He reached forward again. Faster this time. Aiming to shove Seagal back. But this time, things didn't go the way he expected. Because the moment his hand came forward, Seagal moved. Not fast in a dramatic way. Not flashy. Just precise. A small shift of the body. A controlled step. And in less than a second, the man's wrist was caught. Firm. Locked. Like he had walked straight into something he didn't see coming. The change was instant. The confidence on his face disappeared, replaced with confusion. Then shock. "What the?" He tried to speak, but his voice cut off. Because he couldn't move. not the way he wanted to. Seagal didn't tighten aggressively, didn't twist violently. He just held, controlled, measured, enough to stop him completely. Relax, Seagal said quietly, but it didn't sound like advice. It sounded like control. The man tried to pull his arm back. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. His body stiffened, panic creeping in now, because this wasn't a fight anymore. This was something else, something he wasn't prepared for. Around them, passengers reacted instantly. Gasps, whispers, phones lifting higher, capturing everything, because it had happened so fast. Most people barely saw how. 1 second, he was attacking. The next, he was completely stopped, like hitting a wall that doesn't move. The man's breathing got heavier. His confidence? Gone. Replaced with frustration. Then embarrassment. Let go of me, he snapped, trying to sound tough again. But it didn't work. Not anymore. Seagal looked at him, calm as ever. You're done, he said. No shouting. No drama. Just certainty. And that's what made it powerful. The man tried one last time to resist. A slight movement. A weak attempt. But it only made things worse for him. Because Seagal adjusted slightly. And just like that, the man lost balance. Not thrown. Not slammed. Just guided. Controlled. Enough to make him stumble back into the aisle, completely off-center. The cabin reacted again. Louder this time. Because now everyone understood what they had just seen. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a coincidence. This was skill. Real skill. And for the first time since this started, the aggressive passenger stepped back. Not by choice, but because he had no other option. His eyes locked onto Seagal again. But now, there was something different in them. Doubt. And maybe regret. Because in just a few seconds, everything had flipped. And the man who thought he was in control wasn't anymore. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The cabin, once filled with tension and raised voices, had gone completely silent. All eyes were locked on the same scene. The aggressive passenger standing off balance in the aisle, and the man in front of him, calm, steady, untouched. Steven Seagal hadn't changed his expression. Not after stopping him. Not after controlling the situation. Not even now. He simply stood there, composed. Like nothing unusual had just happened. But around them, everything had changed. Passengers were no longer just watching. They were reacting. Whispers spread quickly, moving from one row to another. Did you see that? How did he even do that? That wasn't normal. A man a few seats back leaned forward, eyes wide, voice slightly louder now. Wait, I know him. The words cut through the silence. A few heads turned instantly. What do you mean? Someone asked. The man pointed subtly, trying not to draw too much attention. That's Steven Seagal. For a split second, no one reacted, like their brains needed time to catch up. Then, a wave of realization hit. Expressions changed. Confusion turned into recognition. Recognition turned into shock. In no way. Bro, it is him. Oh my God. Phones lifted higher. Some passengers even stood slightly to get a better look. Because now it made sense. The calmness. The control. The precision. None of it was random. None of it was luck. Back in the aisle, the aggressive passenger looked around, confused by the sudden shift. The whispers. The reactions. The attention. What are you all looking at? He snapped, trying to regain control. But his voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. Not after what just happened. Not after what people were starting to realize. A flight attendant stepped closer now, her tone more confident. Sir, you need to step back, she said firmly. But this time, her focus wasn't just on the situation. It was on him, on who he had just challenged. The man turned back toward Seagal, studying his face more carefully now. The calm eyes, the posture, the presence. And slowly, it started to click. His expression changed. Confidence faded, replaced with something else. Something heavier. He hesitated. But he couldn't finish the sentence. Because deep down, he already knew. The man he had been shouting at, pushing, challenging, wasn't just another passenger. And suddenly, everything he had done replayed in his mind. Every word, every move, every mistake. If you saw this happen live, what would you say in that moment? One word only. Drop it in the comments. Back in the aisle, the man took a small step back. Then another. Not forced this time. Not controlled. Just instinct. Because the situation had completely flipped. People weren't watching him anymore. They were watching Seagal. With respect. With curiosity. With admiration. And Seagal? He didn't react to the attention. Didn't acknowledge the whispers. Didn't use his identity as power. He simply looked at the man one last time. Calm. Unbothered. Sit down, he said quietly. And this time, there was no argument. No resistance. No ego. Just silence. Because the man finally understood something he should have realized from the beginning. He had picked the wrong person. And now, everyone knew it. The cabin slowly settled into a strange kind of silence. Not the tense silence from before, but something different now. A silence filled with disbelief and respect. The aggressive passenger finally stepped back into his row. No more shouting. No more attitude. Just quiet compliance. His eyes avoided everyone now, especially the man he had just confronted. In the aisle, Steven Seagal simply adjusted his posture, calm as ever, as if the entire situation had been nothing more than a brief interruption in his day. No celebration, no reaction, no ego, just control. Flight attendants quickly moved in, speaking quietly with the passenger, guiding him back to his seat. This time, he didn't resist. He didn't argue. He just sat down, staring ahead, processing everything that had just happened. Passengers were still whispering. Phones were still recording. But the energy had shifted completely. What started as chaos had turned into admiration. A few seats back, someone shook their head in disbelief. Bro didn't even raise his voice once, they said quietly. Another passenger replied, "That's what makes it worse. He didn't need to." Moments later, the cabin crew made a calm announcement, asking everyone to remain seated as the situation was now under control. But the real story wasn't over yet, because by the time the plane landed, it had already started spreading. Fast. Clips were being uploaded. Titles were being written. Comments were exploding online. Passenger picked the wrong guy on the plane. What happened mid-flight shocked everyone. Never judge a quiet passenger. Within hours, the incident, real or exaggerated in retellings, had gone viral across social media platforms. Millions of people were discussing it, not because of violence, but because of control, because of restraint, because of how quickly arrogance collapsed when faced with calm confidence. And somewhere in that noise, one message stood out. Respect. The kind that doesn't need shouting. The kind that doesn't need proving. Back on the plane, as passengers gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, Seagal remained quiet, moving with the same calm energy he had the entire time. No interviews. No attention-seeking. Just leaving. As he walked down the aisle, a few passengers nodded at him. Not out of fear, out of respect. And he simply nodded back. Nothing more. Because for him, it was never about proving anything. It was about ending it the right way. And the passenger who started it all? He left the plane quietly too. No words. No attitude. Just a lesson he wouldn't forget. A lesson learned at 30,000 feet. That sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one you should never challenge.